Good morning. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 24 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show, brought to you this morning by our good friends over at MyTech, who provide tomorrow's identity verification for today's uncertainty. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single weekday straight into your homes at 8:30 BST. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Ben Brabyn, who is the former head of Level39. Ben was at the helm of the fintech accelerator Level39 until earlier on this year. So in today's show, what we're going to be talking about is fintechs in the age of COVID, his journey through Level39, and maybe what he's going to be getting up to next. As always, we do love getting questions. So over on LinkedIn, give us a shout of where you're coming in from this morning. Give us a shout of any questions you've got for Ben or myself, and we'll weave them into the conversation where we can as well. If you know anybody who should be listening to this at this stage, I mean, let them know. What else are they going to be doing? They're not really, commuting or going anywhere, are they, right now? So let them know what they should be watching, and me and Ben will try and entertain. So, Ben, thank you so much for getting up this morning. I appreciate you making the time to come and chat to us. How's it going?
It's a pleasure to join you, David. Good to see you.
How's things?
Very good indeed. Yeah, so I guess we're getting into the first settled stage, aren't we, of lockdown? Getting really used to knowing it.
It is. Do you know what? I think I've created a routine for myself, which just about seems to be keeping me sane, which is good. So yeah, I'm getting, like I've said to a few guys, I feel like I'm getting more exercise than I have been. I feel like I'm probably eating healthier than I have done for years. So there's got to be some come out of this stuff, hasn't there, for sure? But how's everything with Corona affecting you?
Well, I guess I used to working from home for most of my career. I've actually worked from home, so Level39 in a way was a bit of an exception to that rule for me. So in some respects, this is a return to the familiar.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's definitely that difference between people who, like you say, are used to this. I mean, as an ex-consultant, then I've been used to working in like a very dark corner in a Costa. Do you know what I mean? So working from my house for 3 months is actually pretty good from my perspective. So the people who have been used to where, and then there's people who love having like a real specific setup with their desk. Like they're very particular about how things are. So it's interesting, like say, given you've had that background of working from home. I mean, have you got any tips for people who are sort of trying to get used to this?
Well, I guess like you, I think having a routine is really helpful, and that routine, including exercise, I think is vital too. And that of course is harder than it was. I'm a keen swimmer, so the pools are closed, so I'm not swimming these days. But finding ways of making sure you're getting a bit of exercise for the body as well as the mind seems good. And I suppose the other thing, of course, is if you possibly can, spending time talking to a variety of people just to keep your social bearings, really, both professionally and personally. I think those are the two main ingredients for me.
Yeah, keeping those horizons broad, as you say, in terms of everything that's kind of going on. What I guess on the swimming, that you're very going to struggle with that one, aren't you? There's very little unless you've got a paddling pool in your garden right now. Then keeping swimming going is going to be a bit difficult, isn't it? But where in the UK are you, Ben?
I'm in Warwickshire, South Warwickshire, lovely sunny Warwickshire. Right.
Okay. Well, that's good. So you've got a little bit more chance to get out into the countryside a little bit more than some people sort of in the cities, I guess. We'll get into Level39 in a second, but before that, your background was the Royal Marines. So a bit different there to go from the Royal Marines to. Do you want to sort of? I said to the Alex at Starling yesterday. Explain to me getting from being a journalist to banking, but explain to me the Royal Marines to running Level39.
Well, it's convenient to be able to do this in the past tense because I can pretend there was a sort of rationale, a flow, and a logic to it. But maybe it was a series of misunderstandings. So I started off as a Royal Marine, as you say, and then I came up to London to find out what London was, what was going on there. And as a result, I think of a misunderstanding, I got offered a job at JP Morgan.
Wow.
Investment banking analyst. And so I plunged into that. I'm sent off to Wall Street and on the analyst training program, which was wonderful. It was a kind of total immersion in Excel and financial modeling. And while I was doing that, the dot-com bubble was reaching its sort of point of maximum inflation and then bursting. And so I made the rather kind of counter-cyclical decision at that stage to to plunge into understanding some more about technology. I learned a little bit, of course, just a glimpse about finance, but I could see all this amazing technology, first of all, creating great excitement and then great disappointment. So I plunged into setting up what would now be called a fintech, what would be called a crowdfunding business back in the year 2000. The terms were, well, I hadn't heard them. So spent the next 10 years doing that. So was a rather sort of self-taught early stage fintech beginner, and did that for 10 years, sold that business in 2010, and then stumbled through a couple of other startup businesses before being approached by the UK government to help overseas investors to find UK companies to invest in. And I did that for a couple of years. Of course, while I was doing that, I was pointing a lot of people towards the fintech community at Level 39. And while I was there, I was also developing some technology in my spare time to increase the capacity of the team I was in the UK Trade and Investment Department. And then I was approached by Canary Wharf Group to run Level 39.
Amazing. So Royal Marines to entrepreneur in four easy steps, I guess. It's amazing when the transition there. I mean, being an entrepreneur, I think, is mostly a mindset, right? You either are somebody who can do and go and make things happen, or you're not really. So it's great to, again, I think probably that military background actually is actually pretty good for those types of things, right? Because particularly from a Royal Marines perspective, actually the way in which people direct within the Marines isn't. I think a lot of people kind of make this mistake in thinking the Royal Marines isn't about telling somebody precisely where to go, precisely how to do it, precisely where the setup is. They train people and then let them make decisions to move the things forward, don't they? So there's a lot of similarities there between the Marines and being an entrepreneur, I guess.
Well, I think, yeah, comfort with uncertainty, coupled with determination to seek progress. There's a fairly shared characteristics, I guess.
Yeah.
So I've been very impressed by the number of people who I came across in a military environment, whether it was in the Marines or other organizations, who've gone on to be very successful entrepreneurs. Yeah.
So, I mean, you joined, I mean, we were just joking offline a second ago, you joined Level 39 about 3 months before 11FS did. But, 11FS, like our first office was at Level 39. And it was Level 39 is a fantastic place, like fantastic community. We really, really enjoyed, we look very fondly back on those times, kind of grabbing coffees and spending time with you, with Lawrence from Innovate Finance around the corner. It was and is such a great community. What's your sort of highlights of your time during that?
Well, it's tempting to say, David, the highlight was when you guys turned up, of course. And certainly,
flattery gets you everywhere, Ben.
That was it was and still is a great community. And so the real privilege for me was being part of a group of about 1,000, 1,200 people as it grew, really covering such a breadth of innovation, predominantly focused on financial services, but broader than that as well. And 50 different nationalities, different types of approach, different sort of commercial structures, a kind of an embarrassment of diversity in terms of technology, business model, and so forth. Embarrassment of diversity in another respect, in that it was very much underrepresentative of many groups in society. So that was always a preoccupation. But I think we made good progress on that. And I was certainly very keen that the habits we formed, the culture we created, was as inclusive as possible. But that work, of course, is only part done.
Some really interesting comments over on LinkedIn. I'll kind of read a few of them now. But morning to everybody who's watching this. Hey Zara, hey Martin, Mr. George Kelsey. How's it going, George? Welcome to the show. Charles, morning. Raul over from India. Good morning. We've got a comment here, Ben. No suit today. I think people were expecting you to be. You've always looked like a very dapper dresser. Like when I used to roll in to get a coffee at 8 o'clock in the morning, looking worse for wear and feeling even worse, you always looked very, very smart. So you definitely kind of improved the place on that side of things. Morning, Steve Brown. How's it going? Oliver Smith. Good morning. David Kolb, good morning. Good to see you again. Yasir, good morning. Oh, from sunny Manchester now. Hey Bianca, how's it going? So lots and lots of people kind of joining into this, and a lot of love for Level 39, a lot of love for the work that you did there. And like I say, there was so many great companies that kind of went through it. I mean, that was always the thing. We started FinTech Insider podcast there, and it made it really easy for us because we could walk 2 or 3 meters in any direction and knock on a door, and there was a fantastic startup with really passionate founders who wanted to tell their story. So for us, it was the absolute perfect place to start the podcast. But also when it comes to 11FS building that company, there was so much support from the community. Like I say, whether it was physical, as in like humans there to talk to, or whether it was the Slack groups that were set up. I think community was like the constant thing there. But I think the other part about Level 39 was usually a group of startups together scares the hell out of bankers or regulators or governments. But you guys managed to sort of traverse the that tightrope of making it work for startups and making it a place where startups can flourish, as well as making it a place where the bankers, the regulators, the governments, the amount of delegations that you've had through Level 39 from, I think at this stage, probably every country on the planet, because they were fascinated by what happened there, was just staggering. So, I mean, how did you balance those two things?
Well, I reckon that first and most important was we had to be a place that was welcoming. And so, we were, and the team still is, fantastically welcoming. And it was a real privilege to be a part of a team of people who are so habitually welcoming, gracious, supportive, and really broad in their engagement with people. Treat everybody, whatever they're doing, whether they're an entrepreneur or representing a corporate or a government domestically or internationally, or the media, the whole breadth, we sought to make welcome. And a huge credit to the Level 39 team for that. And Amy French, who now leads the team, was absolutely the epicenter of that. So that is embedded, and it's fantastic that once the restrictions are lifted, that welcome awaits. But I guess that what we were really seeking to do was to draw in a much wider constituency of interest than would normally be the case. So sometimes the narrative of entrepreneurship is very much the sort of, if I may, David, the David versus Goliath version, in which the small band of determined people are sort of taking on the world. Actually, there's a more enlightened approach. And of course, you come to Canary Wharf, the heart of a huge center of financial innovation.
I think we've lost Ben for 2 seconds. I mean, I think we lost you for 2 seconds then, Ben. I was about to start waxing lyrical about David and the David Goliath story then, but do you want to pick up? We just got to you come to Canary Wharf.
Sure. So you come to Canary Wharf and you find there are 120,000 people working hard in financial services already. It's sense to work with them. And it's sense to work with their opposite numbers in other parts of the world. And it's sense to work with the regulators, and it's sense to work with policymakers and with academia. And so trying to help all of those different constituencies understand how best to engage was really my main preoccupation, how to be as broad and inviting as possible.
Yeah, I think that's always the key. I think we've definitely found from the things that we've done, it's there was definitely a period where everybody was more combative. But actually, I think the combativeness for me is how it's done rather than who's doing what. Because organizations change what their focus is and can change quickly what they do. But in many instances, just need to be enlightened about the way in which those things can be pursued. So, I mean, there's still a bit of David and Goliath in me somewhere, and I let him out every so often just for a little bit of a rant. But he only comes to the front every so often now. I've got like a David Banner Hulk vibe going on at this point, which is sometimes it's beneficial. So what are you up to next then, Ben? Because obviously with leaving Level 39, I guess you sort of left Level 39 about the same time that the all of the restrictions kind of come into effect. So it must feel quite weird, working at a place and giving everything for it for 4 years and 3 months, 4 years, 2 months, to then be in a situation where not only are you away from it, but you're away from everything for a period of time. It's quite surreal, isn't it? But what's the plans for? I mean, on the other side of everything that's happening on the pandemic, then what are you going to do next?
Well, I think probably like many people, all of the assumptions which I had, many of them are up in the air, and I am really very comfortable with that. It's a good thing sometimes to sort of shuffle the pack, and so I'm not rushing to conclusions. I've been approached with a fantastic array of interesting things to get involved with, and I'm very much enjoying exploring that at the moment. But I'm conscious that the world is changing quite substantially, and I am also comfortable with not knowing quite a lot. So I'm taking a little time. I'm taking time to allow my perspective to broaden and deepen, and to enjoy catching up with people who have got rather different views from me too. But over the last couple of years as well, I've been wrestling with a concern, which is that although I think Level 39 is an example of an immensely welcoming environment, it's also actually built on a very...
Sorry, Ben, I think we lost you. Go again.
Sorry. So I was just saying that I think that communities like Level 39 are fantastic. They contribute and create huge value, and 200 companies in that community building incredible value and growth. But the effects of that are often quite narrowly distributed. Even the customers of fintech and even financial services more broadly don't reach everybody, as we're finding now, as the banks try to reach small businesses around the country, and people who are, if you like, the wrong side of the digital divide.
Yeah.
So the extent to which we have been supporting inequality, the growth of inequality, is something which I think we cannot ignore for long. And at a time like this, when we're all so dependent on key workers, many of whom are themselves on very low incomes, who are themselves in fragile conditions, highlights the fact that if we want to continue to build fantastic high growth companies, I think we should make absolutely sure we have a social license to operate. So for the last couple of years, I've been quietly building with a growing group of friends and allies a movement called Genie Shares, which is really an attempt to help make the case for entrepreneurship and small businesses, but without resorting to technical arguments or economic arguments, simply by making entrepreneurs relatable to many more people. The inspiration for this actually comes out of work by Thomas Piketty on the one hand, and Peter Tofano, who's the Dean of Saïd Business School, on the other, looking at how you involve more people in growth, more people in upside. And the design of lotteries is quite informative about this. So what we've sought to do is create a mechanism for entrepreneurs to distribute small but non-trivial amounts of equity in the businesses they create, or shares of their turnover, in a way which means that many, many more people might possibly own a slice of that growth. And it's not so much that this will change the Gini coefficient. It's not so much this will really redistribute wealth, but it can redistribute hope. It can redistribute support for high growth companies. And that's something which is going to become increasingly politically important. So for me, it's always been a side project. It's taking a little bit more of my time at the moment. And we're about to issue a call, an invitation to entrepreneurs to make their pledges, just 1 minute to camera pledges like this in your own home, if you're working from home, offering 1% of your equity, perhaps to be distributed to a key worker, someone in health services, someone in the supply chain, someone who's volunteering, or a carer. Really just to cement in our collective minds the role of entrepreneurship much more broadly in our community.
I mean, it's fascinating. I think, like you said, there's two sides of that, isn't there? There's the, as you say, fintech right now. I mean, we always talk about 11FS. We always talk about the underserved or overcharged. And actually, I mean, in society, the underserved and overcharged is actually so broad in groups, because there are pots of underserved and overcharged people in various different ways of life, walks of life. Bizarrely, I mean, trying to do this now, Ben, given everything that's happening with Corona, given actually the real focus on those heroes on the front line who are being, as you say, not paid very well, but actually asked to do, amazing feats of bravery sort of every day on behalf of everybody else in the country. I think these things are always difficult unless you can give people some mind share. And actually, from a mind share perspective, people are very focused on what can they do to support these guys. So what sort of scale or size would you be aiming this at?
Well, I think this is something for everybody. If you remember, 2 years ago, John McDonnell, then Shadow Chancellor, suggested that public companies should be 10% in employee ownership. And I think that, for me, having these conversations became a lot easier after that. He'd set out a 10% suggestion for public companies. I'm suggesting 1% for all companies, but certainly it's much easier when your governance structure is simple. So this is something which I hope can draw attention to early stage entrepreneurs. Yeah. Of course, the invitation extends to bigger companies to show leadership. And so I'm talking to several corporates at the moment about not doing the pledge themselves, but supporting small companies that do. So for example, if you're working with a lot of small businesses, why not help some of those striving entrepreneurs who don't have the same reserves that you do to demonstrate their commitment to their community? And the reason that this is not a purely philanthropic act is that it's actually demonstrating as an entrepreneur your values, not just, if you like, the technical specification of your product. And we've only done one pilot, so I wouldn't over signal this, but we made a short pilot film of this with an entrepreneur called Peter Kelly, who distributed £30,000 worth of equity, 1% of his business, last autumn. And his sales have gone through the roof, largely as a result of this. His customers have gone from saying, well, you qualify, to we love what you are, who you are, and the way you are. And so I think there's an opportunity really to take a huge stand as an entrepreneur for what kind of business you want to be now and the other side of coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean, the implications, as you say, for a very early startup is minimal from a cost perspective, but obviously from a directional perspective in terms of the culture and the values and everything that you're setting out is huge. I mean, I wonder how actually this it sort of keeps them true to their vision as they grow as well, right? I would have thought a much larger organization with, as to your point, if it's a public company and 10% is owned by the employees, I reckon that company, I mean, there's always that balance between what's right for the business and what's right for the employees. And if the employees have more of a say in terms of the running of the business and how the business is set out, then actually there's a situation where, you know, organizations that have 10% will just be better run businesses because of this as well. So, you know, you can see it working on all of those levels to sort of keep those organizations growing in the right direction.
Well, I hope it's part of a movement, and I think there's been a clamor for more inclusive growth. I think steadily building over the last few years. I suspect that coronavirus, which is of course reinforcing so many inequalities in our society, is going to challenge us all the more to test models like this.
Great. So we've got loads and loads of questions online. I mean, it's a fantastic initiative, Ben. Where can people find out more about that before we move on to some of the questions?
Fantastic. Well, it's a work in progress. So if I may, I'm going to invite everybody who's on board at the moment to get involved. You can find out at genieshares.com. That's Genie, rather like the sort of Aladdin Genie, GENIE shares.com. You can get in touch with me, and you can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter at Ben Brabyn, BRABYN. And so please do join in. I'd be delighted to follow up with anyone who'd like to discuss the part they can play.
Sounds great. Anybody who's interested, get in touch with Ben. Questions on, we'll sort of run through a few of them. Eric van der Klein, your predecessor at Level39. So jumped in and asked a question. So what do we think in these times the government can do to ensure that the UK doesn't lose its lead in fintech? Because obviously in the fintech and banking sense, we've done so much and we've sort of come so far. Pretty sure that's the lyrics to a song, but I can't put my finger on which song. What can the government do you think, in these times to ensure we support the fintech community and support the businesses in it to make sure we keep that lead?
Well, this is awkward for me because I've made a very good line of work lately in following Eric's example. So I would normally turn to ask him a question like this. You've caught me out, Eric. So I guess that I think the government has played an important part over the last few years, and particularly in its support for innovation through the Financial Conduct Authority. So I certainly found around the world an appetite for insights into how it is that the UK thrives so much. And that Financial Conduct Authority approach, based upon, of course, the flexibility of a common law jurisdiction, I think is hard to overstate. So the government has done a great deal, but that's not all just been in the last few years. It's built on freedoms which are embedded in the way the country operates, the kind of operating system of the country, particularly the legal framework. So I guess continuing to protect and defend that. And I think perhaps looking slightly further ahead, as we reconsider, for example, our rights to privacy, the control of our data.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point on privacy. I think the sort of changing expectations of that during this period, I think, are going to be really significant. Do you want to just continue that point?
Yeah, so I think the from a personal note is I'm going to see if I can do something to improve my internet connection. So apologies for outage.
All right.
I think the government's done a great job historically, but looking ahead, making sure that we balance the rights to privacy and effectively the rights of the individual at a time when those will be increasingly contested for very good reasons of social protection and healthcare, but also when one of the underlying trends that we're seeing at the moment is the massive growth of a number of platform technology businesses. And in a way, Europe may, by focusing so much on the rights of the individual, be in danger of missing out on some of the advantages being developed in other parts of the world. And I think the government must address that head on.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a world where, I mean, pre-COVID, the world was looking pretty divisive, wasn't it? With whether you thought Brexit was a good idea or thought it was not a good idea, you knew that a large number of people disagreed with you one way or another, right? Actually, if anything, coronavirus has really pulled everybody together to be sort of unified against a common enemy. And I think a lot of the diversiveness between people has really sort of fallen away, which is good. I hope we can kind of keep that feeling when we sort of come out of this, that actually, regardless of the direction, then we are all sort of really in this together. I think even you'll sort of notice, I think for a period of time, even the media were being pretty balanced and pretty good to anybody. Now they got bored of that and they've started picking on various different people, I appreciate, but like you say, it's I think the sort of balancing of we're all in this together, how can we fix these things, how can we move forward, and actually if you look at the to answer Eric's question, I think with not only the government but the regulators, and we're seeing the Bank of England, we're seeing the FCA, we're seeing everything that the Treasurer is doing to support people and businesses, and for me, I mean, I think we're moving into a very good period, both for the FCA and the Bank of England, given they've always been quite antagonistic. But for me, I think having Andrew Bailey and having the right people in charge of both the FCA and the Bank of England, I think we'll see a much more collaborative future between those guys as well. Another question over on LinkedIn for you, Ben. So Shubham Joshi, how can a collaborative ecosystem be nourished remotely? I mean, this is something that I think, again, Level39 has always been very, very good at doing, because your Slack groups and everything that you've kind of set up there are not just for people who are there now, but actually how your sort of alumni of Level39 works, I always thought was fantastic. I mean, I popped back into that pretty regularly just to say hey, or to bring people into various different things that we're doing, or share anything that we're up to. So have you got any tips for how you guys went about doing that in terms of creating that remote structure for startups?
Well, I think it's immensely difficult to maintain the intensity of encounter that you find in a community like Level39 without being physically co-located. So there's a role for real estate, there's a role for place in this, undoubtedly. But as that is more challenged now, the ingredients which persist. So if I may, I'm going to share what I observed over 4 years as the best predictive indicator of success for the entrepreneurs that I came across. It was the ones who were being talked about when they weren't present. And I was fascinated by this. This is how reputations are created. And there's plenty of work on this in network theory. So it's well worth spending some time studying network theory if you've got a bit of spare time saved back from your commute. The insight I think that I noticed was that the people who were talked about most when they weren't present weren't those who necessarily had the most compelling product or service, but they were those who were the most effective bringers together of others. So they played a really useful closure function within the ecosystem. They would be helping to endorse, to introduce, to explain third parties. And as a result, they actually became more and more central to the networks of everybody else. Now, of course, a part of that is simply time spent talking to people. But the other ingredient, and the one which I think answers this question, is have an idea. It doesn't need to be your product or service. And in fact, it's sometimes helpful if it isn't, because if you put all of your eggs in that one basket, then and talk only about your product or service, your relevance is always going to be quite low. Have an idea which is bigger, much more inviting, much more embracing, and associate yourself with that in people's minds. And then when they need, or they know someone who needs your product or service, they'll come to you. So if you want to operate an ecosystem remotely, I think the traffic to operate in is ideas, bigger than your product or service and your business. And that's, I think, something which, especially at a time like this, when people are casting around for confidence and clarity, if you can offer invitations to be part of something, then that's good for business, but it's good for much more than just business.
I completely agree with that. I think, very often, I mean, in my example, we with what we've done with 11FS, it's not about what we do, it's about what we believe and what we stand for. And actually, from our perspective, we speak so little about what our products or what our services or what those things are. But actually, what we talk about is actually a hope to try and make the industry better. And I think, exactly as you say, I think if you can be in a situation where you can address those things, because really, I mean, I often sort of say, I mean, I say this all the time, it's not really what you do, it's the way that you do it. And I think if the thing that you stand for is change and positive change in the industry, what you do today as opposed to what you do tomorrow. I mean, Amazon doesn't stand for one specific product. If it did, it would be really difficult for people to understand, wouldn't it? But that's a great learning, Ben, and I'm sure you've seen many organizations come through Level39 on that basis. So okay, I'm afraid we're 9:02. We've run out of time, but Ben, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Where can, again, for anybody who wants to get involved, where can people learn more about Genie Shares?
So genieshares.com is a great place to start. Also at Genie Shares on Twitter. And please do get in touch with me. I'm Ben at genieshares.com. I'm at Ben Brabyn on Twitter. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, that's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe and see you tomorrow. I'll be joined by Joe over at MyTech, who is their head of strategy. I've lost track of what day it is. It's Friday tomorrow. But I will see you at 8:30, bright and breezy. If there's anybody else that you want to see on the show, tag them in the comments. Drop me an email on david@11fs.com. I have no shame. I'll reach out to anybody at this stage and get them on. Everybody seems to be saying yes, which is awesome. So have a great day, everybody. Stay safe and see you tomorrow. Thank you.